Honorable Speaker.
Go on.
I didn't see that. Thank you very much, Right Honorable Speaker and Honorable Members of Parliament. I will introduce the new funding model for higher education. It is founded on principles of equity, inclusivity, and leaving no one behind. It shifts from the approach of block funding to universities through capitation to provide financial support to individual students from diverse socioeconomic backgrounds to access education in universities as well as technical and vocational education and training institutions in all programs that they qualify for, irrespective of the cost of the programs. Financial support to students is based on their levels of need as illustrated by their family incomes highlighted in 5 bands. For the first band, those are families with a monthly income of up to Kenya shillings 5,995. For the second band, that is families with a monthly income of between 5,996 to 23,670. The third band is for families with a monthly income of between 2,680 to 70,000. The fourth band, loans and scholarships are distributed across the various bands and households expected to meet a small proportion of the program cost. For the first band, the government supports up to 95%. That is 70% scholarship, 25% loan, and the family contributes 5%. For the next band, the government supports up to 90%, that is 70% scholarship, 60% scholarship, and 30% loan, while the family contributes 10%. Allow me also to emphasize that there is what we used to enjoy called boom for the students in the various bands. So for the first band, the students get a boom of 60,000, and the second band, a boom of 55,000. In the third band, the government scholarship covers 50%, the loan 30%, and the family contributes 20%. The boom or upkeep loan is 50,000. In the fourth band, the government scholarship covers 40%, the loan 30%, while the families contribute 30% and the students receive a boom of 45,000. And in the final band, the government covers 30% scholarship, a loan of 30%, while families contribute 40%, but the students also receive an upkeep loan or boom of 40,000. So in this report, Honorable Chair, Honorable Speaker, and members of Parliament, will share more information on the new funding model to deepen your understanding and that of other stakeholders, and also to highlight the extent with which the model is meeting the financial needs of eligible university students across Kenya. I appreciate the key issues that were raised in this House, Honorable Speaker, and I'll go straight to them. The first question was the accuracy of the means testing instrument in assessing students' financial ability and determining which band to place them. Honorable Speaker, the means testing instrument is the engine of the new funding model. It evaluates the financial capacity of families to determine appropriate financial assistance to the students to meet their level of need. The MTI has been used by the Higher Education Loans Board to award loans to students for over 25 years. As such, Honorable Speaker, the MTI, it is not new. However, it has evolved to provide funding based on the 5 bands explained above, which are aligned to the needs of individual students. The model has undergone rigorous review and validation to ensure accurate categorization. In 2024, a task force whose members I have introduced here comprising officers from the Higher Education Loans Board, the Universities Fund, the State Department for Higher Education and Research, university vice-chancellors, and university lecturers also undertook a review to enhance and validate the MTI. I have attached a report and I'll just summarize it at the end as an annexure. However, allow me to emphasize, Honorable Speaker, that the MTI determines the level of need of students based on the following 10 parameters. The first one is parents' background, and here varied weights will be assigned whether whether a child is orphaned or from a single parent or has both parents. Gender, we have varied weights whether the child is male or female. And course type, we are working out on affirmative action for government priority programs, and this year we began with agriculture. Previous school type, varied weights are assigned to whether public or private, and the nature of the private school considered, because some of them are very low-cost private schools. Then there's also the aspect of expenditure on education, whereby varied weights will be assigned on the number of siblings in schools. But also, we look at this variable in terms of how much you're spending on, let's say, private education or national schools, because that then also speaks to how much you're worth. Then there's the family size and composition, with varied weights assigned to whether you are polygamous, monogamous, number of dependents, highest education level, and age of parents. Marginalization, varied weights are assigned to students from marginalized counties. And persons living with ability, we apply affirmative action. Chronic illness, we apply affirmative action. And the income as well. And allow me, Honorable Speaker, to emphasize that income has been really problematic to determine, because they are from the information that students provide, you can tell that they are able to live, so they can sustain themselves, they are able to go to school, but then when it comes to income, most of them will put 0. Actually, 70% of the students declared that their incomes were 5,995 and less. So then this calls in the significance not only of integrity, but also of applying some form of penalty to try and get the students to give the right information going forward. So each student is scored on each of these parameters, and the weights analyzed in a mathematical model. So all of these variables that I have mentioned, they have been given weights, and these weights are determined by stakeholders. So we put stakeholders in a room, students, parents, lecturers, members of society, and ask them, how significant do you think family size is in determining the financial capacity of a family? So each student is scored on each of these parameters, and the weights analyzed in a scientific mathematical model that determines the student's level of need and the associated band. In 2023, Honorable Speaker, the MTI was used to determine allocation of loans and scholarships based on the new funding model with a high level of success. Out of 112,741 students who applied and were allocated funding last year within the 5 bands, only 9,720 students appealed, and of these appeals, 5,087 were successful. That means that we were able to evaluate the additional information they provided and to ascertain that we needed to reband them. And some of these grounds for appeal are, for example, if a student went to a high-cost school, but they were sponsored. So it is usually not very obvious to us until they provide additional information to show that either there was a harambe or they had a guardian or a sponsor, or their family circumstances have changed. Maybe the parent has lost a job or died. Honorable Speaker, let me highlight some of the challenges in the table which constrain the efficacy of the means testing instrument and therefore the new funding model. The first one is the accuracy of the MTI in determining the level of need relies heavily on the information provided by the applicant. Many applicants have been using cyber cafes and depending on the operators to submit their applications, often without thoroughly verifying that the information is correct. As I stand before you today, Honorable Speaker, I want to tell you that our children have declared that 80% of them, 80% of the 125,000 who applied are from single mothers. Yes, and 70% have declared that their families earn 5,995 and less. So we are dealing with issues of accuracy with data. And there's an operational, so because of this, sometimes there'll be problems in categorization when we penalize them on account of data, but there's an operational mechanism for appeal through the portal. The second issue, Honorable Speaker, is that for the number of siblings as a factor in determining dependence, the MTI cross-references data from NEMIS for primary and secondary school siblings, and from HELB and the Kenya Universities and Colleges Central Placement Service for those in colleges. However, some individuals may not have applied through the COOPS or for a HELB loan. Further, the NEMIS only records students from grade 3 and above, and so the students who are in grade 2 and below are excluded. As a mitigation, a comprehensive Kenya education management education system is being designed to address the gaps in data. Then we have a third problem, Honorable Speaker, about errors that may occur when universities communicate banding. And we have provided some two unfortunate cases whereby the correct bands were not communicated. This is a general problem associated with handling data at the different levels. And the universities have instituted a process of screening and confirming the accuracy of the letters because they are usually generated electronically. Students are also asked to verify their loan and scholarship awards on the portal of the Higher Education Fund. And students have a chance to appeal. The fourth and last issue is that our allocations will always be limited by the available budget. And here, enhanced collaboration will help us to streamline the available resources. And Honorable Speaker, I want to thank the members who are collaborating with the Higher Education Loans Board to provide additional resources for the students. The second question, Honorable Speaker, was how public participation was conducted in the sensitization of stakeholders on the higher learning sector. Honorable Speaker, the Presidential Working Party on Education Reform was commissioned by His Excellency the President of the Republic of Kenya in September 2022. One of the terms of reference of the Presidential Working Party on Education Reform was to review and recommend a governance and financing framework for TVET and also development of university education, research, and training. The Presidential Working Party conducted massive public participation, collecting the views of Kenyans on what kind of reforms they wanted to make in the education sector, and specifically in the financing of education. It was noted, Honorable Speaker, that the higher education, particularly university education, had become unsustainable as the public universities could not meet their financial and statutory obligations to their staff, suppliers, students, and other government agencies, including the Kenya Revenue Authority. It was public knowledge, and as expressed by Kenyans during the meetings organized and held countrywide by this task force, that the differentiated unit cost model was not working. Honorable Speaker, allow me to demonstrate how the differentiated unit cost model, to explain how the differentiated unit cost model was not working for universities. The cost of a program in medicine is 612,000 a year. This was determined when the differentiated unit cost model was implemented. According to this model, the government committed to pay 80% of the cost, while families would pay 20%. So, 80% of 612,000 would be 489,600. However, in the last financial year, for example, for continuing students, we were only able to pay 42% of the differentiated unit cost. So this was 205,632. So there, from the government commitment, we have a deficit of 283,968 shillings. On the other hand, families were expected to contribute 20% of the cost of the program. Most universities were charging an average of 50,000. So even with this average, there's a funding gap of 72,400 from the family side, Honorable Speaker. So when we add the gap from the government side and from the family side, there's a total deficit of 356,368. So what is paid of the total cost of the program, both from the government and from the household, is 255,632. With that deficit, Honorable Speaker, it became difficult for universities to meet their obligations in terms of paying lecturers' salaries, buying the reagents needed for the laboratories, sending students for excursions, and even employing an adequate number of highly qualified teachers, lecturers. So these were the problems that were presented to the Presidential Working Party on Education Reform. Kenyans were unanimous that the allocation of funding and resources remains a critical issue in the education sector. Inadequate financial resources impeded infrastructural development, provision of learning materials, and student and teacher support systems. A new model was therefore needed to turn around public universities and make them financially stable as they deliver inclusive, equitable, transparent, accountable, and quality education to students. It is on the basis of rigorous public consultation, therefore, Honorable Speaker, with key stakeholders in Kenya, including vice chancellors, students, university staff unions, the public, government officials, and higher education experts, the community at large, that the Presidential Working Party on Education Reform designed a new funding model for universities and TVETs. Subsequently, the new university funding model was adopted, guided by the recommendation number 14 of the Presidential Working Party on Education Reform to adopt a sustainable financing model for university education that combines grants, scholarships, loans, and household contributions for differentiated categories of students as vulnerable, extremely needy, and less needy, in order to address equitable access and inclusion in education. Honorable Speaker, the launch of the new funding model was followed by continuous public participation through organized validation, sensitization, and further consultation workshops across public universities and in other selected venues. In addition, there has been ongoing consultation and engagement through both mainstream and social media, resulting in useful feedback that has informed the improvement of the model. The views of the public arising from the public participation meetings, including students, parents, and university staff and management in workshops, seminars, mainstream and social media, and direct outreach to educational institutions have continued to strengthen the model and make it inclusive, equitable, just, and sustainable. Honorable Speaker, other key stakeholders sensitized are Huduma Center managers, Huduma Kenya Secretariat Contact Center staff, and the Huduma Cyber Cafe attendants to be able to assist the applicants. And further, a total of 77 institutions have been reached through Huduma Mashinani initiatives in schools, churches, and career fairs since June 17, 2024 to date. The third question, Honorable Speaker, is to confirm whether there is a possibility of extending the deadline for students to apply for funding beyond 15th of August 2024. I would like to confirm that eligible applicants have every opportunity to apply for funding based on a rolling deadline. The 15th August 2024 deadline was ostensibly aimed at catalyzing uptake and accelerating applications. The deadline was certainly meant to exert positive pressure on applicants to act swiftly to facilitate the processing of data and determination of household contributions in a timely manner. As at 15th August 2024, a total of 104,575 students had successfully applied for funding. The number increased to 125,893 students by 16th August 2024. These included 8,530 KCSE 2022 students. To date, Honorable Speaker, the total number of applicants is 127,623, of which 119,093 are of the KCSE 2023 cohort. It is important to emphasize, Honorable Speaker, that our projection was that only 122,634 students out of the 153,275 students that had been placed in various public and private universities would apply for funding. And this was based on the past trends where not everybody applies for funding. Some parents choose to pay. From past experience, therefore, students tend to relax when they are given a lengthy application period. However, given the challenges that some students have faced in applying for financial support, the deadline for student applications for funding is currently set at December 31st, 2024. Applications will therefore continue within the universities, and this message has been communicated on the websites. The fourth question, Honorable Chair, was on mechanisms put in place to ensure students who have not received national identification cards can apply for student funding. Honorable Speaker, we did ensure that students who have not received their national identification cards could still apply for funding through the new funding model, and the following alternative identification methods were introduced and successfully applied. The students could use first the Kenya Universities and Colleges Central Placement Service identification numbers. They were also allowed to use waiting cards which demonstrate that they had applied for the national identity cards. They used the Kenya Certificate of Secondary Education Index numbers and also their birth certificates. Honorable Speaker, the fifth issue was how information regarding the funding model was disseminated, including the role of education officers in clarifying application processes to students and institutions. Honorable Speaker, information regarding the new funding model has been disseminated through a comprehensive and multi-channel approach, including mainstream media engagements, workshops, and direct communication with the students. The objectives are to sensitize the public on the nature and benefits of the new funding model, to mobilize eligible students to apply for scholarships and loans, and to counter misinformation and disinformation. Digital communication campaign targeting first-time applicants joining universities, their parents and guardians, higher learning institution and the public is ongoing through the digital platforms, the websites, portals, social media handles, WhatsApp, of Higher Education Loans Board and the Universities Fund. Additionally, students are engaged using targeted bulk SMSs, and through these SMSs, the students are guided to the Higher Educational Fund portal. The sixth issue, Honorable Speaker, was clarification on whether universities and institutions are to liaise with the students when applying for funding, or if students lose out due to inadequate communication, poor information transmission, or misinformation. Honorable Speaker, there have been instances when universities and institutions have not effectively communicated with students regarding the application process for funding, leading to missed opportunities. To address these communication issues, funding agencies have intensified sensitization efforts, resulting in the training of personnel within learning institutions, including the deans of students, registrars, and finance officers, to support students in applying for funding more effectively. Additionally, the funding agencies have assigned at least 2 relationship officers to each institution. These officers work closely with deans of students, helping to guide students through the government financing process and resolving any associated challenges. Despite being constrained by resources, the funding agencies have committed to maintaining a presence in learning institutions, particularly as new students report. A successful example, Honorable Speaker, is what was happened in Dedan Kimathi University, where 600 students were successfully guided to apply for funding through the combined effort of university staff and funding agencies when they reported to the institution, not having applied for the resources. Universities have engaged the students continuously through WhatsApp groups and virtual meetings. The institutions have also set up help desks to guide the students through the application process and, where applicable, the appeal process as well. Through the mashinani approach, universities scaled up support for all eligible students, going beyond the students admitted to their respective institutions, but also university vice chancellors engaging stakeholders through the mainstream media. The seventh issue, Honorable Speaker, was to clarify whether the new funding model applies to university entrants for this financial year or if it also applies to continuing students. Honorable Speaker, presently the new funding model applies to 2 cohorts of university students. That is, the students who sat for KCSE in 2022 and those who sat for KCSE in 2023. That is year 1 and year 2 students. Students who sat for their KCSE in 2021 and earlier, that is those in year 3 up to year 6 for those taking medicine, will continue to be funded under the differentiated unit cost model. Through this model, universities are funded through a capitation grant determined by the number of students enrolled in each program, the cost of specific programs, and the available government resources. Honorable Speaker, the 8th issue was whether students will be required to pay the household component of the fees during admission, or they'll be admitted based on the scholarship component of the funds that will be disbursed by the government. Honorable Speaker, under the new funding model, students are required to contribute a portion of the total cost of university programs as fees based on the financial capacity of their families. Universities have established policies on fee payment with inbuilt flexibility that allows students to pay in installments, but they must complete this before the end of the semester. The operating principle is that no student will be denied admission based on their inability to pay the household component in full upfront. To date, unfortunately, Honorable Speaker, 3 cases were cited of universities that were demanding a down payment upon admission of the students. As a ministry, we engaged the respective vice chancellors, and I would like to confirm to this Honorable House, Honorable Speaker, that the students were subsequently allowed to register without paying the fees. This problem was attributed to challenges in internal communication from top down. The ninth question, Honorable Speaker, was whether the old funding model will continue with the calculation of the household component in the fees for the existing students, and whether this may lead to non-payment of the government funding for continuing students. Honorable Speaker, based on the differentiated unit cost, the old funding model will be phased out and gradually be replaced by the new funding model. But presently, both models are applied simultaneously, with the new funding model applied to Year 1 and Year 2 students, while the old one applies to Year 3, 4, 5, and 6 students. The 10th issue, Honorable Speaker, was whether HELB will continue to offer bursaries in addition to loans, as was the practice previously. Honorable Speaker, eligible students under the differentiated unit cost model, that is Year 3 to Year 6, will continue to receive HELB bursaries as well as their upkeep loans. In the present financial year, 2024-2025, a total of 37,125 students under the differentiated unit cost model will be allocated bursaries totaling to Kenya shillings 237 million. Honorable Speaker, allow me to draw the House to a typo on the second last sentence as I read out. So, however, students under the new funding model, that is those in Year 1 and Year 2, will not, so the typo says will only, but it is will not benefit from Higher Education's Loans Board bursaries. Funding for these students will be limited to scholarships as well as tuition loans and upkeep loans only. Allow me, Honorable Speaker, to thank the honorable members of this House for the support they have delivered to enable us overcome so many challenges in the higher education sector. I thank you, Right Honorable Speaker, and honorable members of Parliament.
Members, you've had the explanation from the PS. PS, you'll respond to requests for clarifications. We'll take 4 at a time. Mili Odhiambo. Yes. Avoid making speeches, just say clarifications.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the PS for that comprehensive explanation. I just want clarification on whether there is a working and effective appeal system for students that have been placed in the wrong band so that they don't waste a lot of time getting entry. Secondly, when do you factor in the changing circumstances